Hey everyone, this is James from TDB here, bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today is going to be a non-drinking Inbetweenisode. Going to be talking about a recent trip I did to Taiwan. So we're going to be talking a little bit about those things. Going to kind of be a little bit of a scattershot episode. Going to be talking a little bit as Taiwan as a whole, as a place to travel, tea shops versus tea houses there, and different types of tea that you can definitely find in Taiwan. So this is a place I have been to 3 times before, 2015, 2016, and 2017. I originally had a trip scheduled for April of 2020 that, for obvious reasons, did not end up happening. So the place I've been to quite a few times as far as international destinations that are pretty far from where I live here in Seattle. But I have not been for 7 years, which is a little hard to believe, just because I didn't think it'd be 7 years before I would go again. So obviously a lot has changed since 2017. My tea situation, I've only acquired more tea. I wouldn't say it's like way more tea than 2017. I had acquired a lot of what I already have then by that point, but I definitely have more than I did then. Since then I also have a daughter. So this trip was certainly not exclusively about tea, nor did I intend it to be. I think Taiwan in general is a very nice place to travel, and I do heartily recommend it to plenty of non-tea people as far as a place to go to. So I was traveling with my wife, my daughter, who is 10 months old, as well as my wife's sister, so my sister-in-law, and her husband, who are a little bit younger than I am. I will also quickly shout out, before I forget, that the number one resource, in my opinion, for looking at tea in Taiwan and Taiwanese tea culture and things like that is, in the English language, is Marshall Insight. So would definitely recommend reading through his blog and things like that if that's a place that you're interested. And I think Taiwan, for a lot of people, a lot of tea drinkers in particular, both poor Taiwanese Longs, otherwise, is kind of seen as a little bit of a tea mecca, a place that people are going to go to and flock to, and there's a lot of different things that you can find really interesting there. And I think it's largely for a good reason. I haven't been to every single tea destination or whatnot, but I think Taiwan's a really good one. Not only can you kind of have a good experience just in the city of Taipei, going to different tea shops or tea houses and things like that, but you can also get out to where tea is grown. I think as far as a traveler goes, I am a very urban traveler. I like to go to cities. I like the density of things there. I like the different food and things like that. I like nature, but I think as far as, if you're grading nature versus that stuff, I tend to rate nature a little bit lower than your average person. But you can totally have that experience there. For instance, my wife and I stayed in Taipei the entire time, whereas my sister-in-law and her husband ended up traveling around, going to Alishan, a couple different places. So going to be releasing a couple different episodes kind of inspired by this trip and a couple different teas that I did get there. So first going to talk a little bit about kind of the Western perspective of Taiwan. So I like food a lot, quite a bit. I would say Taiwan is not necessarily my absolute favorite food destination, but it's pretty high up there. It's a lot of enjoyable different foods and things like that. And I think for tea people that are probably already have like a pretty good openness to experience a lot of the different foods there are a lot of fun to tear into and to enjoy. So definitely a good place to go as far as that goes too. One thing I was really reminded of that I had more or less forgot is just how friendly the people are. I've done a lot of traveling since 2017 too, and Taiwan is definitely kind of, I feel like it's a fairly easy destination to travel to. It doesn't quite have, even the big city of Taipei, where I've spent most of my time in Taipei, isn't quite as hectic as some of the other cities, both in Europe or in East Asia. So like I feel like Tokyo, Singapore, and Seoul have a little bit more of a pace to them that's a little higher intensity than somewhere like Taipei is. Of course, it still is a very major city, but I would say overall it's very friendly and pretty easygoing. And with the Google Translate apps these days, where you can just point the app and use the translation there, I would say it's easier than ever to navigate. I'm also reminded how dense it is compared to American cities, and I say density in kind of a good way. I think density is a good thing, and I think going there and traveling there makes things very easy. The fact that you can hop around and get to a lot of different things very quickly using their very good MRT Their convenience stores are excellent as well, things that you can definitely do with increased density. And, since 2017, where I lived in probably one of the more populous parts of Seattle, the denser parts, which is still not as dense as Taipei, by the way, I've moved a couple times to more kind of increasingly neighborhood type situations. So, going there is definitely a change of pace. My daughter really liked it, so she's very social for a 10-month-old, so that was a lot of fun as well. Let's get into a little bit of the tea stuff too. So one thing I did want to talk about too, that crossed my mind as something to discuss is sort of tea shops versus tea houses, and there's certainly an important distinction to make there. One thing you're going to run into is just like, where do I go for tea? And I think for a Westerner, I can understand why you would use those a little bit synonymously, even though they mean fairly different sort of places there. First is that a tea house is a place that you're more expected to go sit down and drink tea. You have your own table and things like that. And it's, I suppose, closer to kind of like a coffee shop or a cafe, although it's kind of its own thing there too. Probably the most famous of those is Wistaria, which now also, in addition to its location in Taipei, has a location in Paris, which I have been to a couple of years ago as well. And it's just a really nice place to drink tea and hang out with other people. I met up with Emilio there this time. So just a nice place to kind of like reconnect. It's sort of like you would use a cafe or something. You can potentially bring your own tea there. You can also drink the different teas that they have. Wistaria is nice because you can drink kind of from their range of pu'er as well as some of their older teas. A couple other ones wanted to mention too. Stop By Tea House, which is also located in more or less a similar or close by neighborhood to Wistaria, Yongkong area, which is sort of like touristy, but touristy in a mostly nice way. The area, not Stop By. That's one of the kind of like ones that you don't hear mentioned too much, but ran into Noah from Floating Leaves there and met up with another tea person there, and had a good time. So I would definitely shout that place out. So give them your business if you're curious. Just to set expectations correctly, it's a place that you would want to go in. You would want to hang out for some amount of time and just kind of drink some tea, whether it's a tea you brought or another tea. So just very, very relaxing and a good place to kind of get out of kind of the more urban and just slow down just a little bit. Another place where you can run into a number of tea houses is the Maokong area, where you would take the Maokong gondola. Another place that I would say is touristy, but kind of in a nice, pleasant way that I would heartily recommend. And so Wistaria and a lot of these places do actually sell tea and teaware and things like that too. Just that's not the emphasized focus of them. That's not their core business. Their core business is that you sit down, you have tea, and you drink there, and so you will pay them for basically that service. It's something that's definitely a little more pricey than like even a meal in Taiwan can be, but as time has passed and I'm in a somewhat better financial situation than I was a decade ago, it doesn't really bother me. I think it's well worth it, certainly for someone visiting Taiwan. So a tea shop, on the other hand, is a place where the expectation is that you're scouting different teas, and you're basically looking to buy in higher quantity. Again, highly recommend Marshall's blog for talking about this. So basically the expectation is that you're going to drink tea for free and you're going to try tea. You should not hesitate to ask about different teas and things like that, especially if you are interested. And then you would, you don't have to buy it, but if you are basically looking to buy it in like some sort of quantity. If it's oolong, kind of standard gradations are a jian is 600 grams. You can buy it in like half a jian, 300 grams, or a quarter of a jian, 150 grams. So you don't necessarily need to buy 600 grams. Of course, you can buy more than that too. These are usually the places where you probably end up sitting down, trying a bunch of pu'ers, or if you want to try Taiwanese oolong, that sort of thing. Different shops will kind of specialize in different sorts of tea as well. In my experience in these tea shops, this is something that Marshall has mentioned as well, is it's important, especially if you are a foreigner and look like a foreigner, to show knowledge. One thing I wanted to mention, sorry, to circle back. Stop By Tea House is a little less touristy than Wistaria. Wistaria has a lot of tourists that go to it, so if you want a little bit more of the local experience, perhaps Stop By is a little bit of a better choice. Anyways, to go back here. So important to just show some knowledge, because the assumption is going to be like, oh, I read about tea as something to buy in Taiwan, and so I just kind of stopped by the first tea house very haphazardly. But if you're going to a tea house and you have certain intentions and there's something you want, like there's a pu'er that caught your eye, you should definitely mention it. You should show, to the extent that you can. I mean, obviously you shouldn't just be like spouting out random tea trivia or whatever, but show that you know, have a bit of a knowledge, and then you will, slowly see the people perk up as I realize that you are actually a little bit more than kind of just a rando coming into their store to buy kind of like the most basic, cheapest tea. So even just knowing like the Taiwanese or the Chinese tea names for it, like Dongfang, Meiran is like Oriental Beauty, that sort of thing is very, very helpful. In terms of types of tea to shop from Taiwan, obviously Taiwanese Oolong is a easy one to shop for just because it's so widespread. And Taiwanese Oolong is quite a range. You can get anything from Dongding to Baozhong to Oriental Beauty to different high mountain teas, Lishan, Alishan, that sort of thing. But you can also find things that you would be a little bit harder to find in the West, so things like Old Oolong. I think Marshallen has fairly high standards as far as that goes compared to myself, but also to other people as well. So what you would want to ask for is, you could ask for Old Oolong, you could also ask for Lao Cha, which just means old tea. And usually that will mean Old Oolong. Sometimes they'll pull out a pu'er or something like that. But if you want to be clear about it, you definitely want to clarify that. One other thing that I kind of forgot about that's definitely widely available is like very, very ordinary, fairly mediocre kind of older pu'er. That's, fairly mediocre stuff as far as this stuff goes. But it's hard to find. It's hard to find just like really okay 20-year-old pu'er. And so, a lot of these shops that don't even specialize in it will just have some random, somewhat Hong Kong storage, somewhat humidly, definitely going to brew like a reddish brown color, and something that the Western market is lacking, and it's relatively cheap to buy. So it's a type of tea that you can definitely watch out for there too. So like that and aged oolongs are sort of the teas that I tend to focus on there. I do like to buy a little bit of Taiwanese Oolong here or there because I do like it, but it's one of those teas that you don't want to accumulate too much because it's not going to, you want to drink that in a relatively timely manner. You'll find that the prices specifically for Taiwanese Oolongs are just lower, just because you are getting a little bit closer to the source. And it's one reason I recommend a place like Tea Home, because it's actually priced sort of like the Taiwanese market, where you're just closer to that source, and so the prices aren't too crazy. You can buy like, I don't know, a high mountain tea for definitely under 25 cents a gram pretty easily out there. Okay, so that I think just about wraps up this Inbetweenisode. I will be doing a couple more Inbetweenisodes related to the trip and different ideas that I had. If anyone's going to Wistaria, actually, I would say hit me up because I want to actually, I wanted to look over their menu and potentially do an episode on that. So if you go, I would love for someone to just take the photos of kind of like the basic tea menu so I can take a look and see if it's worth covering in an episode. Just an idea I had after I visited there, of course. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.